99.9% of the time, I eat dessert every day. Probably multiple times a day, to be honest. Sometimes it's just a bite, sometimes it's more than a bite of a pint of ice cream.
So good.
What I eat and how much I eat of it really depends on what my body's telling me, and that varies from day to day. And because I've become in tune with my body and able to interpret what it's telling me, I'm able to satisfy my sweet tooth, yet still go to bed feeling comfortable and doze off to sleep without feeling super stuffed with a little help from my CBD. Current obsession. My point here is that if you eat dessert every day, it's not a bad thing. I'm a registered dietitian and I do it. So today I want to dive into this topic of eating dessert every day and share my personal experience, but also some of the science behind it. I'm going to share why you kind of maybe should eat dessert every day. And we're also going to dive into the topic of sugar addiction and see if it's legit. We'll get to the bottom of it. Stick around for that. Okay guys, so before we dive into our sweet talking, so funny. I want to let you guys know that in a couple of weeks, if you're watching that live, it is when this is being released, I'm holding a free pop-up Facebook challenge all about how to master your hunger and fullness. It's going to be a, like I said, totally free 5-day challenge where you're gonna learn how to interpret your hunger and fullness cues so that you can eat dessert every day and still go to bed feeling comfortable. I only do these challenges just a couple of times a year, and you don't wanna miss out on this one. These are always jam-packed with info and teachings, and you're gonna meet so many new girlfriends who are just like you looking to understand this stuff. I'll add the link to where you can sign up in the description. You, again, do not want to miss this. These fill up so quickly, so don't wait to sign up. It starts on September 27th of 2020, obviously. That's where we're at right now. So that's about 2 weeks from now, so get your name down there. Super excited about it. Okay guys, so let's get back to eating dessert every day. I eat dessert every day for a pretty simple reason. I like dessert. It brings me joy, it tastes good. It's really all there is to know. I am totally one of those people who has a sweet tooth after dinner, and guys, there is nothing wrong with that. Last night, I had some apple crisp with some vanilla ice cream on top of it. So good. I'm working on a recipe for it, so stay tuned. When this video goes live, it should be up in a week or so. That is good. And you guys know, I don't really swear a lot, so if I'm dropping bombs, that's good. Another reason that I do eat dessert every night is that study after study has shown us that restriction is going to lead to overeating and binge eating. This goes for both overall foods, allowing yourself to eat enough food, but also types of foods. So not allowing yourself to eat dessert or carbs or whatever it might be, your favorite cookies. One study that I really love to reference is a study that was done on sugar. The study was actually done on rats. What they found was that the rats who had access to both sugar and their more nourishing chow, rodent chow, I think is what they call it, had a more moderate intake of the sugar and didn't really have any of those binge-like episodes. However, there was another set of rats who they took access of the sugar away, so they only had periodic access to the sugar, and they found that those rats had more of those binge-like episodes on the sugar than the ones who were able to have it whenever they wanted. Okay, I know, so you're like, Colleen, that was rats, I'm a human. What's the deal? One of my favorite studies to refer back to is the Minnesota semi-starvation experiment. I've referenced this study before. It probably rings a bell to you, but it's for good reason. It's really kind of called this hallmark study of dieting. So basically the part that I want to focus on now is that these men were put on these diets, and when they came off of the diets, they were warned not to quote unquote overdo it. They were given pretty much unlimited access to all the foods that they weren't allowed, and foods in amounts that they could have whatever they wanted. And again, they were told not to overdo it. In essence, they were being told not to eat too much, but their biology was telling them from being on these diets that they needed food, and they needed the food that was being restricted. So they went ham on that food. One man actually had to have his stomach pumped because he said that he just could not satisfy the craving that was in his stomach. That is like what happens when we restrict food. It's a normal phenomenon. You're not crazy. It's not your lack of willpower. A lot of these men also became obsessed with food. They were thinking about it. They were reading about it. I mean, how many times have you sat there on Instagram watching those tasty style videos when you're on a diet because you're so hungry, you fixate on food? Or you scour recipes forever. Some of the men became obsessed with cookbooks. If you've experienced this kind of like, you can't stop thinking about food, it's normal, you're not alone. It's honestly kind of like a hunger cue, having your body tell you, hey, let's think about this thing even more because I need it. It notices that you're not letting it have it, again, be it overall foods or certain types of foods. So that drive to eat it, it's almost like the forbidden fruit mentality. If you say you can't have something, you're gonna want it even more. Okay, now let's talk about sugar addiction. So sugar does elicit a feel-good response. There's no denying that. But the question here is it an addiction? When we do pleasurable things, dopamine is released. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is released by your brain that kind of signals that reward system. Like, yeah, you go. It feels good. Now, dopamine can also be released when I give my husband a hug, or when I cuddle with Theo on the couch, or if I'm playing with my nephews at the park. These are also things that elicit that feel-good response. Now, another interesting thing to note is that deprivation of something actually increases the reward system. So if you are restricting sugar from yourself, you're not letting yourself have it, when you do have sugar, it's normal to have a heightened reward system. You're going to have a heightened sense of pleasure from it. Does that make sense? So one topic that's been talked about a lot is it the actual act of binge eating or eating these large amounts of sugary foods that really heighten that reward system? Is it that feeling that we're looking for, not necessarily the food itself? And I think that's a really, really key thing. Bottom line, we know that the more that we restrict something, the more that we're going to want it, the more heightened sense of that reward system that we're going to feel when we actually eat ourselves. And then it's almost like our body's like, whoa, that felt so good, I want to do it again. It's kind of like you're going in a circle here. Let me know in the comments if that makes sense or if you want to hear more on that topic. The topic of food addiction is really controversial, and there is something called the Yale Food Addiction Scale, which is meant to measure kind of food addiction in itself. But one thing they don't take into consideration is dieting and restrictive eating in the responses of the study. They actually talk about that in the Intuitive Eating Workbook. I was just reading through it again, and it's such an important piece that's not necessarily captured in that. Okay, so now let's talk about eating dessert out of habit. I get this question a lot, Colleen, maybe I'm just like habit eating at night. And it's a legit question. We are humans, we do develop habits. I do have a blog post that is all about what to do if you're not hungry but you want to eat. I'll link to that blog post in the description, but basically, here's what I recommend if you feel like you might be eating out of habit every night. So the first thing I want you to do is to make sure that you're not restricting food during the day. I want to make sure you're not restricting overall foods or certain types of foods, like you're not letting yourself eat one sweet thing until the evening, because that's going to cause you to really, really want that food at night. One thing you could do is ask yourself if you're eating dessert every night and it's leaving you being like, oh, I don't feel good. Because like I said, there's nothing wrong with eating dessert every night. But if you feel like you are constantly eating past the point of fullness, or again, you're just not feeling good, you could try incorporating more sweet things earlier in the day so you don't feel like it's a response to restriction. That's something that you could try. Also, if you're feeling like you're just eating out of habit, what you can do is to just take kind of inventory of the emotions that you're feeling at night. Sometimes we eat as a way to cope with stress or anxiety or boredom. Kind of ask yourself, what am I feeling at that time? If you get to this point and you're like, I'm not actually physically hungry right now, I want this dessert, I am not seeking stress relief or anxiety relief, whatever it might be, and you still want it, frickin' eat it. I do suggest using some mindful eating exercises. I have an entire video with my favorite mindful eating exercises, but using those just kind of allows you to eat dessert every night in a way that allows you to still feel good, mentally and physically. Like I said, I do eat dessert most nights, but here's the thing. Sometimes it's a bite of ice cream, sometimes it's a couple cookies, sometimes it might be a couple slices of dried mango, so good. Some days it might be some banana and ice cream. What I choose for my kind of sweet ending to the day really differs day to day. Sometimes I want like the real deal ice cream, and other days my body is literally telling me, hey, those frozen blueberries in there, that's gonna hit the spot. And I know what you're saying. That's probably like so crazy to think about that someone would genuinely want to eat like frozen blueberries over ice cream, but that's what happens when you give yourself unconditional permission to eat all foods. You give yourself the choice. It's not just made up for you by whatever diet or food rules that you have. It will guide you for what feels good. Such a foreign concept, I know, but guys, it's so good. And I know that you guys can get to this point too. Trust me, I was like, up to here in food rules. If I can do it, you can do it. It's so freeing. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this did not happen overnight. This took a lot of work. It took a lot of really normalizing foods and learning to see them all equally, not one is quote unquote better than the other. It took a lot of work. And while now I can grab a family-sized tub of ice cream out of my freezer and just have enough to satisfy me and not think about the entire amount that's there, it didn't start off this way. I paid a lot more attention in the beginning, and now it just becomes second nature. But that upfront work is so worth it to become more mindful, to truly listen to your body. It just becomes second nature. It was also really important for me to learn other coping skills besides using food. I mean, dieting and food rules are a huge thing that we use as a coping mechanism, whether it's, again, for stress, anxiety, whatever, just to feel like we have a sense of control in this crazy world. I had to learn other ways to cope and not use food as a way to control my life. If I don't have something sweet every night, I'm not gonna feel satisfied when I go to bed. I don't wanna say every night, most nights. Like I said, 99.9% of the time, I'm not gonna force myself to eat it if I don't want it. But most of the time I do. If I ignored this, my sleep would suffer, my husband would suffer because I'd probably be cranky as crap. And trust me, he's put up with way too much of that from when I had all my food rules. I'm so confident that you can get to this point too. You can have your cake and eat it too every night in a way that feels good. And that is why I'm putting on this free Master Your Hunger and Fullness challenge. And I'm super excited and hope you'll join us in it. It's gonna be amazing. Like I said, packed full of information. And after the 5 days, you're gonna have so many new tools in your tool belt to get to this point too. Again, I'll put that link in the description so you can snag your seat. It does feel quickly, so don't wait. It's like a little no food rules party in there. Okay, not little, it's like a huge party. All right, guys, that is all for this video and really why I eat dessert every night, how I'm able to do it in a way that still makes me feel good. And I hope that you can take some just knowledge from this video and apply it to your life. And let me know in the comments if you like this video. Be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe to the channel. I've got loads more coming for you, and I will see you guys next week with another video.